Okay, hi everybody. It's Monday. It's 1:04 here in Israel, and it's time for Pirkei Avot, History of Hashkafa, brought to you by the Tel Aviv International Synagogue under the inspired leadership of Rabbi Ariel Constantine. We are in the middle of the third chapter, and we are coming up to one of these Mishnayot that we genuinely have to take a few weeks to crack, because every single line in this Mishnah actually is just chock full of insight and possibilities. And as is our wont in these classes, we the way that the words were perceived changes from generation to generation, from time to time, from place to place. So, we are actually in chapter 3, Mishnah 11. Rabbi Lezer Modai, Rabbi Lezer of Modi'in, which now we know is actually more or less on the site of the contemporary Israeli city of Modi'in, which is at the foothills, in the foothills of the Judean mountains, and the city of the Maccabees. It was a very active city throughout the Second Temple period. In fact, they found Second Temple era synagogues there, which is one of the proofs that, in fact, we're talking about the original city of Modi'in. In fact, one of the neater things you can do here in Israel on Hanukkah time is actually to go. They have a Hanukkah lighting. They light Hanukkah candles in this Second Temple synagogue from in Modi'in. Now, whether the Maccabees are actually there or not, we can debate. But it certainly is it's an interesting experience. In any event, so that's something to put in your calendars for later. Rabbi Lezer Modai Omer, he used to say, he was wont to say, Hamechalel et HaKodashim, a person who desecrates that which is sacred. I'm going to come back to see what that means. Usually that means the sacrifices in the temple. The problem with this, with interpreting it that way, is that he, Rabbi Lezer Modai, was a contemporary of Bar Kokhba. In fact, he was executed by the Romans for his support of the Bar Kokhba revolt. He was executed in the period after the after the rebellion was put down. A person who despises, maybe not as strong as despises, certainly makes fun of, is not careful about, takes lightly the mo'adot, the holidays, the set times. Also, it's a very open-ended word. It's not clear exactly to what we're referring. And a person who humiliates a person, his friend, in public. Humiliate in Hebrew comes to halbanat panim, because the idea is the person becomes so humiliated that his face turns white. Rashi points out that people who are really embarrassed, the blood drains from their face and they turn white. So that's what we're talking about here. And a person who violates or undoes the covenant of our father Abraham, which can either refer to people who refuse to circumcise their children, or who actually undergo the operation, which you can't reverse a bris milah. What you do is basically you reconstruct a sort of form of plastic surgery, which was already possible then, where you recreate the foreskin so that you look like you actually were not circumcised, with the implication being that you don't want to be Jewish anymore, or you want to assimilate, or whatever the case might be. Alav shalom, v'megale panim b'torah shelo k'halacha, or a person who elicits meanings or interprets the Torah, or reveals ideas which are not actually legitimate in the Torah, misinterprets the Torah. Even if he has already amassed himself a tremendous amount of Torah and good deeds, and lo chelek l'olam haba. He has no place in the world to come. Now, this is an absolutely stunning statement, because all of the people that Rabbi Elazar Modai here quotes are people who are absolutely I don't know the word is. They're moles in the body politic of Jewish people. They deny Brit Milah, and they make fun of the holidays, and they make fun of anything that all that we hold holy, and all this other stuff. And who are we saying? Even if he's learned and he has good deeds, what happened? What kind of I mean, it's bizarre. A person who maybe doesn't have learning. I mean, okay, but whom are we talking here? It seems doesn't really go together well, or so it would seem. So if we take it's a very strange comment. It's a very, very strange comment. Sometimes this last expression, even if he is learned and stuff like that, it's not inappropriate. I'll give you another example. I'll give you an example. There is a statement in the Talmud in Tractate Brachot where the rabbis say, if a person goes into a store, and hamaratzeh ma'ot liisha k'dei listakel ba af al pi sheyesh biyado Torah ma'asim tovim eino nitzon midino shel Gehenna. Guy walks into a store, and the cashier is really, really good looking. She's a good looking woman. So what does he do? He goes in to buy whatever he buys, but he doesn't pay with his credit card. And he doesn't even pay with, he doesn't pay with cash. He doesn't pay with big bills. He pays with singles, maybe pays with pennies. And he's counting out the change, so he can sit there and just take in this gorgeous woman who's behind the counter. If you do that in order to lihistakel ba, to look at her, Listakel in Hebrew means to stare at her, even if you're the most learned or the most whatever accomplished Jew in the world. It's not going to help you. You will not be saved from the fires of hell. Now, that kind of statement I kind of understand. The point being that as great as a person can be and as learned as a person can be, people have drives, and they have yitzarim. In other words, they could certainly be carried away and act inappropriately. So it says, it's nothing going to help you. You've got to really be careful about how you deal with your urges, and you're not allowed to take advantage of a woman. You're not allowed to stare at her. You're not allowed to undress her with your eyes, I think was the way they would usually say it. Under no circumstances. And I certainly can understand that kind of statement, because that's the kind of trouble that one's urges can get you into are certainly things that everybody affects, every guy. Just as a side point, by the way, notice that the Talmud here says in order to stare. Lehistakel means to really, really stare. There are several words for using the eyes. What kind of activity does one use when uses the eyes? So one is listakel, which means to stare. Another is lirot, means to see. The rabbis don't use the word to see. The rabbis themselves were not of the opinion, in any way, shape, or form, that that women should not be seen in the public venue, that they shouldn't publish pictures of women, all this kind of craziness that goes on in the, and it really is craziness, that goes on in the certain ultra-Orthodox circles where women are barred and they don't print pictures of women. The rabbis were not talking about that. There's no prohibition against seeing women. Staring at women is another ballgame. Because staring already is inappropriate. It's inappropriate for you, and it's certainly invasive to her. You have to learn how to live with all kinds of people in your environment. So where did this business come from? It comes from actually from a 12th century pietist group in Germany. They were called the Pious of Germany, the Hasidei Ashkenaz, and they were the first really Jewish, small r, reform movement, which argued that people have to do more than the Torah demands. And they were greatly both entranced by and taken aback by the depths of human psychological and emotional both potential and need. And one of the central parts of their doctrine was that you need to go beyond when he needs to find ways, first of all, to overcome one's sexual urges. One shouldn't even give them any kind of run on your life. You have to be in total control of them, and therefore they said it's better to keep away from women because the best thing to do is avoid the situation, avoid the temptation. That very extreme position ended up being adopted in certain Ashkenazi circles, and that's where that actually comes from. In any event, by the way, if you're interested, those of you who speak Hebrew, I actually spoke about this yesterday. For the past 3 or 4 months, I've had a regular spot on TV on Sundays usually in a show called Riklin V'Shut on Channel 14. It's the shows are available on. First of all, I put them up on my Facebook page or on my YouTube page, but also they're available on online at the Roots 14 ARUTZ 14 website. And Dafka talked about this at length yesterday. So if you're interested in taking a look, Riklin V'Shut for the 3rd of July, the last 6-7 minutes, Shimon Riklin and I discussed this. Okay. In any event, so that I understand, but I don't understand the situation in which, and we'll have to really delve into this. I really don't understand how do we get to a situation where a person sheyesh biyado Torah masim tovim, he's a tremendously scholarly, he's a fully scholarly person, a great scholar, and has a tremendous good deeds, and he does all these horrible things. So that's something we're going to have to ponder, but it's going to take a while till we get there because I need to take every single line in order to look at how it's understood, in order to be able to get to that bottom, to get that conclusion. Okay, so right. So let's go back to the beginning and just take it one line at a time. Hamachalelet HaKodashim, a person who defiles the sacred things. On the face of it, the word Kodashim, sacred things, refers to sacrifices in the temple. Very simple. If I go in and I show disrespect towards the sacrificial order, either I actually am, I don't act right when I'm in the temple, so I defile. I'm a tameh. I defile sacrifices, which is a serious offense. I don't bother going to mikveh before I go to Harabayit or go to the temple. I don't undergo the. Well, that's actually more serious than that. But whatever the case might be, I don't show the proper reverence and the proper care when I handle sacrificial meat or sacrificial anything. Then that's a serious infraction. And Rabbi Elazar Amodei is saying you will have no place in the world to come if you do so. All right, Beseder, that's fine. But the question is, why would he do this? Why would he say this? He's living in the period. He lived and flourished. He was born before the destruction. Hold on. No, he was actually born after the destruction of the temple. So there's no temple. So why is one of the things for which he's going to be famous forever, one of the things he was wont to say, one of his wise sayings, today's the 4th of July, Ben Franklin had tons of wise sayings for which he was known, right? Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Good. So why include this? It's totally irrelevant to daily life at the time that he's teaching. There are a couple of I think there are a couple of possibilities here, but neither of them are really happy. But they're both possible. One is that Rabbi Elazar Amodei is essentially saying that anybody who gives up He's not, in other words, he's not speaking in terms of physical handling of korbanot, but a person who gives up his hope for the rebuilding of the temple. And in that regard, he desecrates the memory of the temple. That's a serious, that is really showing a lack of faith. It's almost a form of heresy. And as a result, he pays a price in the next world. That is possible, if only because, as I've tried to point out in a lot of different places. By the way, I mentioned this as well. I usually don't quote myself so much, but I had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to be interviewed on the Tikva podcast about the Jewish connection to the Temple Mount and the Jewish imaginations and through the generations, relationship to the temple and the restoration of the temple and all kinds of things. So one of the things that I pointed out there, and which I point out in a lot of places that I've published, that the restoration of the temple was something that was at the top of the Jewish agenda way into the Middle Ages, and one could argue even into the early modern period. I can prove this through all kinds of customs and art and all kinds of stuff. But here we're talking about around the year 125 CE, when the possibility that the temple could be rebuilt is certainly still around. And don't forget that, for those of you who don't know, some of you might not know, that in the 4th century, the Emperor Julian the Apostate gave the order to rebuild the temple. He did it partly to be nice to the Jews and partly to stick it to the Christians, but that's not really the issue right now. And the Jews really organized and started rebuilding the temple. It means it was something that hundreds of years after the destruction they were still talking about. So it might be that Rebbe Eliezer Modai is saying that if you act, if you act dismissively of the Jewish hope for the restoration of the temple, then you have no place in the world to come. It's sort of like a rejection of the final redemption type of thing. So that is a or if you treat it lightly, then he has these very ferocious things to say. Another possibility is that it seems pretty clear. Bar Kokhba, in the course of the rebellion, apparently in 132, 133. The rebellion went from 132 to 135, so it's like 4.5 years. At one stage of the rebellion, Bar Kokhba actually conquered Jerusalem. And there were all kinds of hints and indications that even though the temple wasn't rebuilt, they restored the altar, and they reinstituted the sacrificial system. And they had, all of the things which hinder politics, hindered that kind of move today didn't apply then. So, for example, even though people were what we call tamei mate, they came in contact with dead bodies, or they went to funerals, or whatever the case may be, and they were tamei, but nevertheless they had the ashes of some really far-thinking Kohen saved the ashes of the last red heifer, about which we read in Israel last Shabbat, and those of you in Chutz La'aretz will read this coming Shabbat, which is the way you become tahor. So they were able to do this. So it may very well be that the statement that he makes here is against that background. Hamachalel et hakodashim. In other words, a person who doesn't take it seriously. Here we have an opportunity to reinstate the service, and let's not blow it. Or when we do it, let's be careful, whatever the case might be. So this might be a really very, very contemporary comment on the part of Rebbe Eliezer Modai in terms of things that were actually happening in situ at the time. If that's the case, then we have a statement that was actually coined, certainly, possibly at the time of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and which stuck. Obviously, it couldn't have been done after the Bar Kokhba revolt, because at that point, Rebbe Eliezer Modai was no longer alive. There is a third. As time got on, and despite what I said before, there's really no contradiction. As the imminence of the possibility of restoring the temple faded, I'm not saying that that in terms of the desire for it, that it went away, because it didn't. You find that modern commentaries, and this is really kind of cool, that modern commentaries actually perceive Rebbe Elazar Modely as saying something else. Or they want to take his words as an opportunity to get a more contemporary statement in. So that in the 19th century, Rebbe Lifshitz in Germany makes a comment which actually could easily be a contemporary moment, a contemporary comment. And that is, he says, this is a person who denies the very possibility of anything being sacred. He is a total and thoroughgoing secularist. There is nothing. Is nothing sacred? The answer is no. Nothing is sacred. Sanctity, sacredness, things like that are things that the people that religion fills your head with. It doesn't really exist. Everything's mechanical. I mean, we all know that kind of approach, which is the dominant approach, and certainly in the West today. It's not absolutely not true in the East or certainly in the Middle East. And on the contrary, we try to make everything that was sacred chol. That's what mechalel means. That's basically what Rabbi Yisrael Lifshitz says. He says that those who take the sacred and make it secular and denude it of its charisma are people who have no place in the world to come, and that already is a perfect fit, because it's simply measure for measure. If I deny that exists, so why should right? When I find out that I was wrong, it's not gonna work. Strikingly, the people who denied and there were in the 19th century and in the 18th century, certainly people now who deny the existence of the sacred. It was against them that the 19th century, in the early 20th century, German religious philosopher Rudolf Otto wrote his absolutely formative book, The Idea of the Holy, which I strongly recommend you to read. It's a phenomenal book, even though it's 100 years old. Some books like pass the test of time. Otto says that basically one of the things that people in the modern era don't get is the fact that there are fundamentally different types of knowledge. We have been trained, we've been raised with the idea that the only knowledge is scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge, by definition, is based on mathematics. Mathematics, by definition, calls into question the ability to know or to quantify, to prove the subjective elements or impressionist elements of our lives, like the use of the senses. I can prove light. I can't prove the existence of red, or egg. My shirt's eggplant. Whatever the case might be, these are things which can't be proven because they can't be mathematically expressed because they're subjectively expressed. Emotions are like that. And as a result, all of what are called secondary characteristics of things that actually make life worth living they can never be known according to generally. I mean, I'm generalizing. According to general modern philosophy, and that's why the secularists say, I can't prove it. Prove to me there's a God, mathematically. Prove to me there's a God. Prove to me, I don't know, whatever you want. Prove to me that yellow is a color, mathematically. You can't. You can analyze the wavelengths that seem to parallel, but the experience of yellow you can't find. So Otto says, basically, he says, yeah, that's very nice, but that's not the only way that we know things. There is the phenomenal, which is what can be quantified and turned into mathematically proven. There's also the noumenal, meaning that the mind, the brain, the soul, he was a religious philosopher, the soul can apprehend things and know things without them being subject to quantification or mathematical or logical proof. Sanctity, he says, is one of them. You can't, the people who go to a place which is holy and experience places that are holy do so intuitively. They know very well what they're feeling. They're not going to deny the existence of those feelings because they know that place is holy. Now, the truth of the matter is, not necessarily a synagogue or a place is formally holy. Although, I will say, I have no hesitation to say that the most overwhelming experience of sanctity that I've ever had that I ever have is when I go to the Temple Mount, but that's not, it's not just there. Sometimes it's places that people sanctify and instill with holiness, and they react accordingly. One of the more, and with this we'll close, one of the more interesting experiences I ever had was one when I was still a member of the tourist police, before I transferred to here to the Judea and Samaria district. My unit was sent to do general security for Yad Vashem on Yom HaShoah. And so we were sort of sat at the gate, and if somebody had a gun, they had to check it with us. And that's basically, we hung around the whole day. It gave me the opportunity to sit and watch all these people walk in and how they responded to being in Yad Vashem. And I noticed from the very beginning, in the police, when you have that kind of duty, you start at 6 o'clock in the morning, so you have a long time to be there. As people walked into Yad Vashem, the men put on kippot. Now, it's not a shul, it's a memorial. It's not why would you put on kippah? Why would you put on a yarmulke? The answer is because the people, it makes perfect sense according to Otto, because they intuited the atmosphere and the sanctity, or you want to say it's sort of like the inverse of sanctity, of Yad Vashem, and therefore intuitively decided, they felt that they had to express it with an act of reverence, like putting on a kippah. So Lifshitz comes and says, that's the problem that Rebbe Elazar Modai was talking about. He wasn't talking about that, because there was no such thing as that kind of secularism in the ancient period, even among the pagans. But he saw it, when he read those words, that's what rang out for him. So it's the same, it might as well have been said by Rebbe Elazar Modai. Hamachalel et HaKadoshim, a person who denies the existence of the sacred, and says everything is secular, and nothing has any significance or emotional it doesn't emotionally transcend anything but the math, such a person has no place in the world to come. So you can see how the same words can actually resonate so very differently to different people in different contexts. Okay, we will stop here, and we will continue Mitzvah Hashem next week. As usual, this year, and as every other is on my YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time.